Hello art stars and welcome. I hope that you're doing well today. I'm going to get stuck straight in because there's quite a lot I want to cover. Yeah, we've got a really fun session ahead. So what I'm going to need you to have is your watercolour paints, a few sheets of watercolour paper, or you can use your sketchbooks. Either is fine. A pot, or preferably several pots of water, because yeah, we're going to be changing colours quite a lot, so we'll save you getting up too many times. A few different assorted paint brushes. If you can check with an adult first, if you can get a few sheets of tin foil or recycled foil, that would be perfect. And again, check with an adult. If you've got some salt, that would be brilliant. And a pencil or a biro. Perfect. Okay, now I'm just going to move my camera so that you can see what I'm doing. So I'm going to start off by doing a water painting with you like this. So today's session is all about experimentation and trying different methods with watercolour paints. And working quite spontaneously to create new abstract patterns and artwork. So we're going to start off with a water painting. What I'm going to do, I'm going to use quite a thick brush here and some clean water, and I'm really quickly going to cover one of my pieces of paper in water. We need quite a thick layer of water, and like I say, we need to work very quickly, and the reason is we don't want the water to dry. We want it to be, the paper to be soaking wet when we work into it. So there we go, nice and wet all the way over like that. And next I might use a slightly thinner brush, it's up to you which you use. I'm just going to choose some colours that I like, so this is personal preference. I just stay away from browns and greys. I think bright colours tend to work best with this. But what I'm going to do, I'm just going to paint some dots of colour onto the wet paper, and can you see the colours bleed out? They run, and this is because the paper's very wet. The water's still sitting on top of the paper, and like I say, the colours run into each other, so this is very good for creating patterns, abstract patterns. This is called wet painting. There we go. I was dotting about, and you see it's a bit drier at the side there. I think some of the water might have run off, and in the drier areas the paint doesn't bleed as much. There we go. So I've got some yellow dots. I'm going to get another colour that I like. I might use a green. You might want to do a few of these. It's quite nice to just play and have a range of them in different colours, trying different amounts of paint. Here we go. Watching the green disperse and make different shapes. Overlapping. It's really nice. I might add one more colour, so I'm going to add 3 colours to mine. Like the one I did before, actually. And it all depends on how wet the paper is, how far the paints disperse. So I've got quite, I think my dots I'm putting in are quite controlled here, whereas with the one I did before, they've run slightly as well. They've really dispersed out, and either is fine. Like I say, it's working quite spontaneously. It's a case of trial and error, and just seeing what you get. So that's why it's worth doing more than one in several different colours. There we go. Nice. There we go. So there's a water painting, and yeah, a water painting, like I say, a wet painting is just where the paper is wet when we start. So it's particularly good for abstract pictures. Here's one I did earlier. This is another wet painting. So again, I've made the paper wet, and I've just painted spontaneously, quite randomly painted patterns on top. And I quite like some of my artwork to have fluidity and be free, but also be controlled. So once it's dried, I've gone back in and added more detail on. So if you want to do that, that's something you can do too. So again, working really quickly, I'm just going to get my page, super wet, all over. And now, just doing whatever I fancy, I'm just going to fill the page with pattern. So I'm going to start with some dots. I'm going to start with the blue. There we go, I've put some dots on. Watch those disperse out. And then I'm going to do some zigzag lines. So when you have a go at this, don't feel that you need to do the exact pattern that I'm doing. You can come up with your own. I'd be quite interested to see the variance actually and the different results. Got some crisscross lines. I'm going to do some bigger circles. And just see what happens when they start to bleed a bit. Crisscross lines. I think the paper's starting to dry a little bit at the bottoms. Those are slightly more controlled. There we go. So I've got some blue. I'm going to swap colours. I will do a yellow, I think. And again, just before it dries, just painting whatever I feel like painting, whatever shapes I think will go. And just watching them bleed into each other. These remind me a bit of knitted woolen jumpers, a bit like the Fair Isle ones. They're called the Fair Isle patterns because we've got the shapes knitted in together, and the colours kind of run into each other a little bit. There we go. I think I've got butterfingers today. I keep on picking things. There we are. And I think I'll add a bit of green as well. And again, like I say, feel free to overlap things, so you can go over the colours with a different colour, watch what happens, how the paints react. Some circles here. There we go. That's quite interesting, isn't it? And what, like I said before, this one I did earlier, all the colours have dispersed out. So once it's dried, and this is just a personal preference, something I like to do, I've worked back into it afterwards. So when it's dry, you know, added different lines and shapes on top and built up the layers of colours. That's up to you. You might like that, or you might really enjoy this very fluid, free bleeding of the paint without more intricate detail on top. Okay. So there's our first two wet paintings, and there's one more I wanted to show you, so you can make the page wet again. So there's one more wet painting. Here's one I did earlier. We're just going to paint some circles over the top, and then when it's dry, I'd like to work into these and put some more intricate pattern on top. So we've got this mixture of the fluid, like I say, bleeding paints and the more intricate detail. So what I'm doing now, I'm just painting some large circles, some large ovals, using a nice green there, like that. So I'm just going to go with two colours I like. I'm just working very quickly again before my paint dries. I'm going to use a blue as well, I think. I'm going to do some circles. There we go. So these are less contained. And I'm going to put that aside to dry. And it's good to come back to that later. So rather than sitting and waiting, we can get on with some other pictures while we wait. But then when that has dried, you can come back to it. And here's one I did earlier. So this was actually, this one's a wet painting. And another option is you can just paint the circles on in different oval shapes on dry background as well. So you've got the option, you can do either or both, wet and dry. And then when it dries, this one here, you can start to add some pattern and detail onto it. So like I say, I really enjoy drawing pattern and detail and making things quite intricate. So this is quite a nice mindful activity. You can just fill out each of the shapes, each of the circles with different lines and textures and marks. So for example, putting out that one with some little circles. And yeah, I'm working quite quickly, just like I say, there's quite a lot I want to show you in the video. And I don't want you to have to watch for too long, but with yours, you know, you can really take your time with this and add on quite a lot of detail. And you can also paint over the top as well and build up layers of colour. So for example, I might use some more blue on top of my blue there. Just going to do some little lines over the top. There we go. Maybe some circles. And I'm going to do some lines going through, and like I say, just using a pencil or a pen, you can do more intricate pencil lines as well. So that's just something you can play with if you want to when that's dried. That's one thing you can do. And now I'd like to use a little bit of tin foil. So what I'm going to do, I've just got two sheets here, two big sheets. I'm just going to scrunch them up into balls like this, and it's a good idea rather than using something fresh. Like I'm going to keep these and reuse them for future projects. I think if you've got any, you know, anything in your recycling bin, it's always good to be sustainable and save the planet. Use what you've already got. So there we go. I've just got two like this, just scrunched up, and I'm going to do a painting, I think, of a tree. So I'm just going to paint quite a basic tree, and I'm going to do some mark making with the tin foil afterwards. It's up to you if you want to do a tree, if you want to do your own picture of something different and try to use the tin foil too. That's absolutely fine, that's great. I'm just going to paint a trunk and paint some leaves, paint some twigs and branches coming off there. It's quite simple, quite a simple tree. My branches, but I'm not going to put any leaves on. I'm going to do that with the tin foil. And yeah, this is a dry painting, by the way. I've kept the paper dry. I've not painted over, because in this instance I want the tree trunk to be quite controlled, and then afterwards I can go on and because of what we're doing with the tin foil, the leaves will be quite free and dispersed. There we go. So I've just painted a basic little tree trunk like this. What I'm going to do next, I'm going to take a piece of my tin foil and I'm going to paint it. So I might make mine, I'm going to be quite creative here. I think I'm going to make my leaves a pink colour. So I'm just going to paint over the tin foil, just over one side, and we should get some interesting marks and textures from this, from printing with this. There we go. And then I'm just going to press it down on the paper where I'd like the leaves to be, so overlapping the branches in the air. So I've done some pink leaves, and I think I'm going to add another colour as well. So this fresh piece of tin foil. What should I do? Maybe a bit of green. And green and pink goes together really nicely. Again, you're welcome to do a tree. You can do any colours you want. You might want to make it look realistic and just use greens or use reds and yellows and oranges to do a nice autumnal tree, or it might be a fantasy tree with a pink trunk and different coloured leaves. There we go. I'm just going to print some leaves on with this. And we've got quite a lot of white space between. I quite like that. I quite like white negative space on my pictures, but if you want to fill that up with colours and make it quite busy, that's fine, you can do that too. And like I said, it doesn't have to be a tree. You could just use this to make different patterns, or it could be, for example, you could paint, for example, a lion's head and then make a mane using tin foil, or do some different flowers. Here we go. There we are. It's quite cute, isn't it? I like that. It's a little bit of printmaking using tin foil. And like I say, you can keep hold of this tin foil afterwards and reuse it for future projects as well. Good idea. And last of all, I thought it would be nice if we could use a little bit of salt. Look at how salt reacts to watercolours. So I'm going to do another wet painting. This. Or you can add it to dry paintings as well, but this, it will absorb better. The paints will absorb the watercolours better if it's very, very wet. So I've just made my paper nice and wet. And I think I'm going to do something, a kind of abstract flower painting. So I'm just going to paint some circles on here, which will be reminiscent of petals. With abstract artworks, we're not aiming for them to look realistic. We just want to give the viewer, the person that's looking at it, a feel of something, an impression of something. So I want to give the feel of, like I say, of something quite organic, like a flower. And again, I'm just working very quickly so that the paints don't dry. There we go. And I might add another colour as well, maybe a bit of blue. Maybe in the middle. Maybe do a few blue dots in the middle. And I'll do a green stem. Some leaves. So like I say, we're just getting the feel of something. We're just getting the impression of a flower. It's not aiming to be particularly realistic. It's abstract, but I want to give the viewer the feeling of something a bit more organic. So we just kind of get that feel of it, like that. And I'm going to use a little bit of salt. Just a little bit on my hand there. And I'm going to sprinkle it onto my picture. And what happens here is the watercolours absorb the salt. And again, you can create some really interesting patterns and textures by doing this. So you might want to create a few different salt pictures like this. That's really interesting. And as it's bleeding out and the colours are being absorbed, yeah, it's becoming more and more abstract. So that's quite an interesting piece. So these are all very experimental and fun to do. And you know what? I've got time. I'm going to do one more with you. And I think for this one, I'm going to show you how we can do some wet and dry painting together. So how we can restrict an area or isolate an area to water colours, and the rest of the background can be dry painted or just left dry. So this is a wet painting. I've drawn the shape of the bird, and then I've dabbed colour on, different colours, when it's wet, and the colours have dispersed out, but as the water's just been on that area, it's not bled onto the rest of the page. So that's something else you can do as well. Let me think, maybe I'll do something simple again. Maybe I'll do a flower. So I'm just going to draw, I'll make mine a bit darker so you can see, but with yours, do it really lightly in pencil. So I'm using watercolours, we don't really want to see the pencil lines over the top. There we go, so really simple flower shape. And in fact, here's another thing you can do. I might do a little bit of colour mixing here as well. So for example, if I want to have a nice orange for the centre of my flower, and like I say, you can try this too if you want. You don't like the orange you've got in your paints, you can mix an orange by using red and yellow. So on my tray here, you can use a spare plate or the top of your watercolour tin. Just use this one here. I'm going to put some yellow down. And I'm going to mix red with it to make an orange. I have lots of red left. I use this pinky red. And I should get quite an interesting, quite a nice orange shade there. And if I want to make it darker, I can add a little bit more pink in if I want to, or red rather. If you want to make it lighter, you can add more yellow. There we go. I quite like that. It's kind of blood orange colour. So I'm going to use that with my picture. And then for colours like green, I mean, I've got quite a few nice shades of green in my paint here. If you wanted to make your own though, you wanted to have an experiment, you can do that by mixing blue and yellow together. So again, these are quite handy, I find, having the tin of the watercolours, because if you go out and about and say you want to paint when you're not at home, you can just do it like this. You can just do it in the lid. Or if you maybe, like I say, run out of a green or run out of an orange, you can mix these other colours. I've got a bit of blue there, somewhere. I'm going to add a bit of yellow to make my own green shade. So I've got kind of quite an earthy green there. I might add a bit more yellow because I quite like a brighter shade, I think. There we go. And you can just, like I say, have a play, have an experiment until you get it how you want. So for my flower, I'm just going to try adding a few different colours around the petals. So I'm going to paint start with one petal, just painted water over one petal, just over the one. I just hold my paper up and you can see me do that. That's just one. And then I'm going to add a few dabs of colour onto just that one petal and watch them disperse out. And like I say, the thing here is, as only this petal is wet, they will only disperse and run out in this area. So I've used a pink there. I might use a bit of this green I've made as well. Just put a few dollops on. There we go. And can you see they just mix just in that area? And then for the centre of the flower, so if I want to do a yellow, I don't want that to spread or disperse. I want that to be contained. So I can just paint normally with a yellow. Because the paints are only really going to run and bleed in the wet areas. So I might try some different colours on a different petal. And actually this is a very basic flower, and I'm just doing it to show you how you could use the wet and dry technique. So you can, like I say, do a flower. It can be a picture of anything you want. On another one of the petals, I'm going to try some of this nice kind of blood orange, reddy orange that I created before by mixing the yellow. So I'm going to do a few dots on there and watch them disperse. And another colour, maybe a blue. Blue and orange are complementary colours. They look amazing together. And yeah, I could paint the flower in different colours. So I could have each petal in a different colour. I'll just have an experiment. And when I put water next to the already painted areas, because it's wet, some of them might run onto it a little bit, that's fine. Like I say, we're expecting quite spontaneous results here. Let's try a bit of yellow, a bit of red again. What should I do with a bit of pink? So just being open-minded, being free to whatever takes hold, takes form with your artwork. Have an experiment. And yeah, I'll do the last two. Watch them disperse. And another option is you could leave it like this. You might want to try adding a bit of salt on top. So this is a very experimental session you guys are going to have now. See how many different things you can come up with. There we go. And it's kind of bleeding a bit into the centre of my flower. I like that. That's quite interesting, isn't it? I might put a little tiny bit of salt onto the centre. See what happens. Sprinkle a bit of salt on. Just to that area. And there we go. That's quite nice, isn't it? So yeah, like I say, it's just a case of experimenting today. So we've got our wet paintings to start with, our water paintings. We can add a little bit of salt on if you'd like to see how that comes out. Maybe try a bit of dry painting and then adding some detail on using scrunched up tin foil that's painted. To do a little bit of tin foil printing. And like I say, with your water paintings when they're dry, if you've got time, so I appreciate we're doing quite a bit today, but this is quite a fun activity, quite a mindful thing, or you can come back to it another day if you want. You can add more layers of paint up, watercolours, or draw using biro or fine liner or pencil. Add quite intricate detail on. That's a nice relaxing activity. And then there's wet and dry painting. So you can, if you want to restrict your bleeding colours to one area, you just paint that area with water and then put a few dashes of colour on. So it's probably easier if you do a drawing first. Do a drawing of an animal or a plant or whatever you want to do. Draw the outline, fill it with water, then very quickly just put some dashes of colour on and watch the colours bleed out. And like I say, they won't bleed too far outside of that if the rest of the paper's white, so you'll get those lovely dispersed mixed colours contained to that shape. And yeah, I really hope you've enjoyed today and go and have some fun. And I'm looking forward to seeing what you come up with later. Have a great day, guys. Bye.